Hey there, welcome to the Astro Psyche Podcast. My name is Shauna Marie McGrath. I'm an astrologer in San Diego, California, and this is my podcast. This is episode 6 of the Astro Psyche Podcast. I want to share with you my thoughts on Neptune and psychological fusion. So this is based on an article or paper that I wrote for a family systems course in my MA in counseling program. And I wrote this a while ago, and I knew that I wanted to share it at some point. And today's that day. Side note, I love synchronicity, as some of you know, and I had been thinking about this particular topic and this paper, and I pulled it out this morning. And when I pulled it out, I happened to look at the chart of the moment, and Neptune was right on the ascendant. So when I'm recording this, it's about 11:50 a.m. in San Diego on December 16th, 2022. And I thought that was such a perfect calling from Neptune that it's like, yes, talk about me now. And so I wanted to talk through this a little bit. I'm not sharing the entire article, but I want to share the parts that I think that you may find interesting and that you may resonate with or see either in your own life or maybe people that you know. And as always, take what is helpful and chew on it, sit with it. And I always love hearing from you and knowing how things click or how things resonate with you. So I was inspired to write this topic because the prompt for this paper was to write about our own personal experience with our family system and apply a family systems psychological modality to our experience. So when I was looking at this, I chose Bowen Family Systems. There's many different theories and ways or models of viewing family systems. Bowen is one particular style. And Bowen Family Systems especially looks at the family from a multi-generational perspective. So it looks at the family not just from a systems perspective, as in when an individual comes in with a certain problem or symptom, we're not just looking at the individual, we're looking at the whole family as sort of like one big psychological organism, which is really cool. And Bowen Family Systems does this. They look at several generations. And to me, this is very astrological because it's basically looking for patterns. It's looking for families, for psychological patterns of behavior that are passed down from one generation to the next. Bowen Family Systems also highly emphasizes the balancing between individual autonomy and relational connection. And that's like their big thing, is that we want to have both. We want to have the ability to have our own sense of secure self and power within ourself, and our ability to understand what's mine versus yours versus theirs. That in Jungian terms would be called individuation. And then we also want to cultivate this ability to stay connected to one another, even in the face of conflict or disagreement. And so I wanted to bring in Neptune here because I saw this Neptune theme when I was considering my family system. And when I'm saying this, it wasn't that I saw Neptune in the charts of my family members, though that could have been the case. And I think that's definitely, if you have consent from your family members, it's very interesting to look at their charts and yours and the synastry patterns that are happening there. But this is more, what I'm more saying is that when I was looking at the relational dynamics, you know, the little bits that I know from one generation to the next, I was like, ooh, there's a lot of Neptune here. I'm seeing and feeling and hearing this psychological pattern that is very reminiscent of Neptune. And this is so important for me because astrology is a language that helps me understand things more. And so that's why I wanted to get at it this way, because Neptune really helped me unfold and understand more of my family system and my way of being within the system. So to bring in more of the planetary archetypes, the cultural historian Richard Tarnas wrote in his book Cosmos and Psyches that planetary archetypes are considered to be both Jungian, psychological, and Platonic, metaphysical. So this means that they are, he said, universal essences or forms that are at once intrinsic to and independent of the human mind, that they are not only timeless universals, but that they are also co-creatively inactive and recursively affected through human participation. So that was kind of a mouthful. What he's basically saying here is that planetary archetypes are universal. They are present in all times, in all places. They are always present, both in our human mind and in the natural world. And not only that, but that they are, he said, co-creatively enacted. So what he means by this is that our living and experiencing is this like participatory way of expressing as well as receiving archetypal themes. And I think this is so cool, is it's like we're experiencing, like I'm like, oh, I see and I feel and I hear Neptune in these stories. And then also my way of being is expressing Neptune, and it's elaborating the archetype itself. So it's kind of this like feedback loop, if that makes sense. That might be really nerdy, but I find it super interesting. So from this understanding, this archetypal energy is universally present within humanity, and it's emphasized in diverse ways based on our actions. Now, the planetary archetype of Neptune in particular, according to Tarnas, it's associated with alternate states of consciousness. So he said these are things such as dreams, visions, mysticism, religious devotion, and also humanitarian issues, such as universal compassion. Tarnas also pointed out Neptune's challenging correlations, which some of you may be familiar with. So these are, I'll say his words and then we'll unpack it a little bit. So he said, the impulse to surrender separative existence and egoic control, to dissolve boundaries and structures in favor of underlying unities and undifferentiated wholes, and states of psychological fusion. Now, what he's basically saying here is that the challenging experiences of Neptune are this desire to totally surrender your own separate or egoic existence, to completely dissolve boundaries, to do that in a desire to merge with one another, to totally give over control of yourself to someone or something else. And that it can, like, Neptune is both associated with mystical experiences where there is this experience of the divine, where the ego dissipates. And he's saying that can also be problematic, and that in order to be a human in the world, to take care of our families, to pay our bills, to nourish and feed ourselves, we do need to have an ego. And I chose his words for this piece, particularly when he said undifferentiated, as well as states of psychological fusion. I was like, oh, this is totally speaking to Bowen Family Systems, because Bowen Family Systems, one of the concepts that that is highlighted so strongly is undifferentiation versus differentiation. And again, if you're familiar with Jungian psychology, differentiation, I think, is sort of akin to Jungian's concept of individuation. So let's see, I wanna elaborate on this a little bit more. So I wrote that these challenging archetypal themes of Neptune are reminiscent of Bowen Family Systems' idea of the undifferentiated family ego mass. What the heck is that? So that term, undifferentiated family ego mass, essentially describes the process of a multi-generational transmission where there is excessive emotional reactivity or psychological fusion in families, and it's passed down from one generation to the next. So in Bowen Family Systems theory, fusion refers to a blurring of psychological boundaries between self and others. And it's this kind of blending with emotional reactivity and an inability to have a clear sense of thought. That it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you get like flooded by emotions. In Jungian psychology, this would be maybe called being overwhelmed by a complex, where there's like so much emotional reactivity. And I think fusion also can be explained where it's like fusion is where when someone does something or is a particular way, it affects you, and it affects you at a deep level in your inner being, and it means something about you. So when someone maybe gives you feedback about something, or they make a comment, that it distresses you and affects you at a very personal level. Now this could be like maybe someone gives you feedback on your work, and it feels like they're changing a part of you. Now this is different than being a highly sensitive person or an empathic person, though I think those of us who are highly sensitive and empathic definitely have a challenge with boundaries and fusion, but it's more than that. It's more than being highly sensitive. It's like there's a fusion of my sense of self, capital S self, with others. And that I think another way that this could manifest with fusion is that sometimes, again, I don't know, maybe you've had this experience where you take on the feelings of others, or maybe it's difficult to differentiate between what someone else is feeling and what you're feeling. It can also manifest as not having clear preferences or desires or feelings within yourself. Things feel kind of like ambiguous, or like a chameleon. You're very influenced by the people that you're around. I hope that makes sense. Let me know. So another way, and sort of a broad theme among other things that I noticed, is that this fusion, this blurring of psychological boundaries in a family system with Neptune can sort of look like where psychological boundaries are confused or mistaken for unconditional love and compassion, or even caretaking. I'm also thinking of the phenomenon of codependence. And when I say codependence, I mean something very particular. I mean, codependence is where a person feels responsible for the feelings and actions of others in an excessive kind of way. And so oftentimes that can look like compassion and unconditional love, when in fact it's this blurring of psychological boundaries. And in fact, maybe that's a really excellent example of a blurring of psychological boundaries, is when I feel responsible for the way that you feel or the actions that you take. I feel that it is my that there is something that I can do to have control over the way that you feel, which, you know, to some extent that's true. But at the end of the day, we have no control over how people feel, how they perceive us, what they do, or how they act. And so that phenomenon is very Neptunian, because there's this blurring of boundaries, and then it's also very connected with Neptunian themes of unconditional love and massive compassion, and even innocence to a certain respect as well. And so what can happen, there's a few different things that can happen when there is strain on a family system because of this fusion. Sometimes there can be triangulation, where the classic example is that there's two partners, they have a child, the child gets triangulated into being seen as the problem, or the child is the one that has the symptoms, when there is conflict within the adult partners. It can happen in so many different ways, but that's like a very simple sort of example. And triangulation happens all the time. It can even happen like in a work environment. If there are two people in a work environment that are in conflict, they feel uncomfortable, and then they bring in a third person to essentially diffuse that tension, to diffuse that anxiety. So triangulation in itself is not bad. It serves a purpose to release anxiety. And if it's done repetitively, in this context, we're talking about intergenerationally over time, then it can create problems because it doesn't allow for healthy conflict resolution. Another way that tension or fusion can be handled in a family system that's very Neptunian is through this phenomenon known as emotional cutoff. And so this is also very Neptunian because it's like there's an illusion of cutoff, but it's not actually satisfying. It doesn't actually do the job, so to speak. So emotional cutoff can involve either emotional or physical distancing to manage anxiety that is caused by psychological fusion. So this can happen between parents and children, between siblings, between partners. It can happen with any set of relationships. Some people seek distance by physically moving away. Others do so emotionally by avoiding intimacy or trying to insulate themselves with the presence of a third party or another person. And I want to make clear that that's not to say that having multiple romantic partners is a way of avoiding intimacy. What I'm talking about here is that can in fact be very healthy, but this is more where the inner experience is wanting to avoid intimacy, and that's accomplished through triangulation, where it's like there's a desire to emotionally cut off, and the only way maybe that a person knows how to do that is to have some distance or to have other people present to sort of buffer. So unfortunately, triangulation and emotional cutoff only manages the anxiety, and it continues to perpetuate psychological fusion. So emotional cutoff is essentially still fusion because it's still based on reacting to another person instead of responding from one's own individualized self. So in this concept of emotional cutoff, I really see the planetary archetype of Neptune in its correlations to illusion, delusion, deception, self-deception, and even escapism. So those are all keywords from Tarnas. And I think that it can be so easy to fool ourselves, to emotionally cut off from a person or a situation, and to be like, all right, that's it. Like I'm drawing a line, I'm drawing a boundary. When in reality, that is an illusion, and that there is still an inner part of us that is fused or being or reacting to them in a certain kind of way. And Neptune is all about trying to have the ideal, but then the ideal is never really present. And then that it doesn't always, but it can manifest as illusion, things being murky, and like trying to avoid a situation kind of like in a secretive way without confronting it directly. And so what do we do with this? So I think that for these reasons, Neptune can be so tricky because of um, its essence that is so hard to touch, impossible to pin down. Neptune is very psychological. Neptune is about our inner feelings and intuitions, and uh, Neptune is the planet of mysticism and seership. It's like the things that we feel, but we're like, oh, like did I feel that? Did I did I have that thought? It's like so wispy. And so I think that uh, the way to work with this is to really work with what I would call the sun energy, or maybe even Saturn energy. Um, to acknowledge what it is that we do feel, what it is that we do want, what our experience is, to start to create that healthy sense of ego and autonomy, and to focus on what is it that you want, what is it that you're feeling, and to differentiate that from what it is that other people are doing, saying, feeling, etc. I think that there's such a huge part of this that's connected to being a highly sensitive person, being an empath, that it can be so difficult to differentiate um, what in our environment psychologically is affecting us versus what is arising from within us. And sometimes it's kind of like a little bit of both, that maybe there's a part of you that's experiencing someone else's stuff, so to speak, and someone else's stuff is touching something inside of you that's maybe very tender. And I think even just having that awareness of like, oh, I'm feeling something that maybe doesn't feel necessarily like it is mine, I think that that can be very empowering and can lead to differentiation, because you're starting to create those little tiny boundaries. You're starting to create that sense of egoic self, and then how you want to relate to others based on your awareness. I think that with psychological fusion, if that's a strong um, presence in your family system, I think also just even knowing that can be very validating. And the more that we make decisions from our own sense of integrity and authenticity, uh, the more that we're creating that sense of differentiation, that sense of healthy, strong ego, as well as the ability to connect with others. And I think that a big part of this is deciding what we want and then not taking it personally the way that other people respond to that. And gosh, this has been a big one for me. Deciding to do something and then not worrying what other people are going to say or think about the actions that I take or the decisions that I make. I think to a certain extent, of course, it's normal to think about how other people are going to respond to us. And it's important to consider that, especially for when it comes to the ones that we love, and that cannot be a deciding factor in the way that we act. That the deciding factor is our own integrity and authenticity to move through the world in a way that is our own. And that doing that is healing the generational patterning that you have, no matter what that patterning is, no matter whether you have children or don't have children, that you are a living, breathing, healing mechanism for your family system and for the others that you come into contact with for their family systems when you are living your life and making decisions from your own sense of integrity, your own sense of authenticity. And that is my hope for all of us. So I hope that you enjoyed this. If you did, please let me know. Please share it with a friend. As always, I love hearing from you and your thoughts and insights. And when you share with me, that invokes more in me and gives me other ideas that I share. And so I love that feedback loop. This has been the Astro Psyche Podcast. My name is Shauna Marie McGrath. And I'm sending you lots of love and wishing you a wonderful day. Bye for now.